Hey, music fans, and welcome back to Sound Lab Studios. Today, name change. That's all, Mama. That's Elvis. Oh, that's all right, Mama. Oh, that's all right. That's what I'm trying to say. Anyway,
It popped in my head just now.
it's good. I like that. Today, we are reviewing Genesis' self-titled album from 1983, aka the Shapes album, aka Mama, aka the album that has almost as many names as Led Zeppelin's fourth album. But anyway, I'm excited to review this album because this was my introduction to Genesis. This album right here. A little preface before we get into the album and the general thoughts and stuff like that.
Background information.
Do I even have that still on here? Oh, yeah, I do. Background information. Except it's my background information on this album. Oh, we lost our viewer because of that. Oh, well, worth it. Anyway, so I heard That's All on the radio, and I'm like, hey, this is Phil Collins. That's the guy who does In the Air Tonight, and that's the guy who does the Tarzan soundtrack. Because, let's face it, a movie about a guy who lives with monkeys should not have that fire of a soundtrack. But Phil Collins was like, I got you. And he made a great soundtrack. If we ever go through Phil Collins solo albums, which I think we will, we'll definitely throw in this Tarzan soundtrack.
Heck yeah, you got to do the Tarzan soundtrack.
Oh, yeah. I just got a Phil Collins album the other day, too. Anyway, I knew Phil Collins from the Tarzan soundtrack, and I heard his song In the Air Tonight on the radio, and maybe You Can't Hurry Love. Oh, there's Nick. What's up, Nick? Anyway, I hear That's All on the radio. I'm like, that's Phil Collins. And then I listen, and I'm like, something's different about this Phil Collins song. Like, this is the best Phil Collins song I've ever heard. Because I liked how there was an organ solo in the middle, and I liked how there was a cool guitar solo at the end, which you don't really hear solos much on Phil Collins solo work. So this is back in my days of downloading music on iTunes, getting a gift card and burning mixtape CDs.
That was me too.
Except this was in the 2010s. So I was way late in the game. I didn't get streaming till like 2019. Anyway, I go and I look for That's All by Phil Collins, and I can't find it. I see, well, there's That's All by Genesis. And I'm like, well let's see if that's what it is. I push play. I'm like, oh my gosh, Phil Collins is in a band. Like, how did I not know this? So this was around the same time that I got my very first record, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And I was at this store called the Half Price Bookstore, which is a store you can get used books, records, movies for a little cheaper than you would at a regular store. And I'm digging through the records. I hadn't listened to or knew very much about a whole lot of artists at the moment, so I didn't know what were good albums to buy. But I saw this in the Genesis albums. And I look and it says, That's All. So I'm like, oh, hey, this is the album with That's All. This is the album with Phil Collins' band. So I buy this album. I get back, I put it on the turntable, and let's just say I thought, this doesn't sound like Phil Collins that I know. Like, this is very different. This is kind of weird and experimental. And it took me, honestly, a lot of different listens to really get into this album. But man, once I got into this album, it's like, wow, Genesis is really amazing. That's before I even knew about Peter Gabriel or any of the other stuff, too. I just thought it was a really good album. And so, because of that, I have a very soft spot for this album, and I'm going to be giving it a pretty good score. Spoiler alert. But
right.
What's your kind of, what's a good way of putting it? Like, general thoughts.
General thoughts, yeah. Well, most of this album was a blind spot. I only knew the big hit song. That coincidentally, that was one of the first Genesis songs I ever heard. That's All. I knew that one for the longest time, and I knew nothing else about this album. So, first listen, I thought it was good, but I thought it was a step down, especially from something like Abacab or even Duke, and then there were 3. I think those are great albums. This one, I'm like, there's some good stuff on it, but it just didn't feel like it was up to par with the previous albums. But I listened to it again. I'm like, you know what? On its own terms, I really enjoy this album, and my score actually did go up a little bit from when I first listened to it. So I still really like this album.
Cool. Okay, background information about the album. So Genesis reunite with their producer Hugh Padgham, who'd worked with the Police on their album Ghost in the Machine. And Genesis had become so big at this point that they were able to buy their own studio, which is called The Farm. And they decided that they were going to record this album at their newly built studio, The Farm. And it was at this point that they decided that they wanted the songs to be credited just to Genesis rather than each of the individual members, because they wanted to be more of a team and write songs in kind of a different way. So that's why they called the album Genesis, because it was all written by Genesis, all performed by Genesis. And for the band, it kind of felt like a new starting point, because they were going in a very different artistic direction. It was a lot more commercially accessible, but yet at the same time, like, it was still very artistic. Like, the songs on this album, while you can play them on the radio, like, there's still a great artistic vision here from Phil, Mike, and Tony. Still great musicianship on here. This is also kind of whenever they start building their songs based on jam sessions that they did in the studio. Before, they would write the songs by themselves, and they'd come to the studio and be like, hey, like, here's my song, let's come up with something else for this. They would go into the studio with pretty much nothing, and they just jam around, and they would build songs just based off of what they were jamming around to in the studio. So, very different songwriting approach to this album. Very different artistic approach. Some people are going to say this is really where you see the beginning of Sellout Genesis. I hate that. I hate that, because there is still very much an artistic vision for this album. Phil Collins is starting to get into more electronic sounds. He has a Simmons electronic drum kit that he uses on some of the songs, rather than just acoustic drums. Of course, you got Tony Banks playing around with more synthesizer sounds. Oh my goodness, some of the synthesizer sounds on this album are so creepy, but it's cool. You got Mike Rutherford with his bass and his guitar, coming up with cool different textures to add to the songs. It's a very good album. Very different than anything they'd released up to this point. But you can kind of hear the influence of like new wave coming in this album as well. I mean, we already had like Who Done It from the last album, where they were basically making fun of new wave, but you can kind of hear a little of that in this album here. So, very interesting songs, very different approach. Still amazing, though. Don't discredit this album. It's fantastic. Let's go ahead and get into our track by track if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, the first song on this album in shape number 1 is Mama.
Mama just killed a man, put a gun. Wait, that's the wrong mama. Yeah, this is the song when I first listened to it, I was like, what was that?
It's very off-putting the first time you hear it.
It was like probably the weirdest song I think I'd ever heard from Genesis. And this is coming from listening to some of the songs on Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. If you go back to that album, it's like, yeah, that's an album about snake monsters and slipper people. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, this is... And he's really crying for his mama on this one. And then there's like this part with Phil Collins is laughing like he's a serial killer, where he's like, ha, ah, ah, ah. I'm like, what? Like, don't do that. That's creepy. But no, I did listen to it again, and I'm like, you know what? The vocal work's pretty cool. I love the drum, the percussions that Phil Collins does on this one. It's like really epic. Parts of it reminded me of his cool little drum thing on In the Air Tonight, but times
Yeah.
10,000. I'm like, okay.
It's that same sound.
Yeah, I think it's a really weird song. I think I've read it's about him craving a prostitute or something, and she rejects him, and then he's like desperately calling for her, like it's his mom or whatever. And I'm like, I think the song is supposed to be this like very goofy song about what not to do, or something like that.
The spiritual successor to Counting Out Time, if you will.
Maybe, I don't know, but I think because of how goofy and weird it is, listening to it the second time, I'm like, yeah, this is probably one of the better songs on the album. I'll tell you, I put it in my top 5. So that's anything.
Okay. Well, such a moody way to open the album. You start out with the creeping synthesizers from Tony Banks. Like, he is all over this track. I read that he had to do like I don't even remember how many synthesizer parts on this song, but like he layered a bunch of them. He worked and slaved away to get the sound just right. And then Phil Collins kind of starts out by programming a drum machine. He doesn't come in on the real drums till near the end of the song, but you know when he's there. You'll know when he's there on the drums. And so he kind of starts singing in like a whisper, and then it gets louder and louder as it goes. And then there's this really cool part where it goes to a major chord where he goes, whoa, and it goes to a major. And then it goes back to the creepy part. And then he does this laugh in the song. It's just like, oh, it's just sounds sinister. He's like, ah, ha, ha, ha. Ah, ha, ha. Like Jacob was saying, like he's a serial killer or something. And then when you get to the very end of the song, he just starts singing his face off, and then the drums come in, and then it gets even more epic. And that end where he hits that high note where he's like, like that. I can't do it like he does, but he just hits that high note, and the drums come in. And it's just like, what is going on here? This is epic. I read that this was a favorite of Steve Hackett, who had left the band at this time, a guitar player, that he said this is one of the best songs that they made after he left. So cool to hear some praise from him. So yeah, really, really cool song. Very odd way to open your album.
But very much so.
At the same time, it's the perfect way to open your album because it's subverting people's expectations. Like, you're like, oh, what did we have with the last album? We had Abacab, like this cool synthy upbeat song. What are they going to do next? And then you get that like, oh, that's different. And then you get you're like, oh, I have no idea what they're going to do next. The next song is a lot more straightforward, and That's All.
Yeah, this is the big song on the album. This is I think this and In Too Deep were like the first 2 Genesis songs I ever heard. So I've heard this song countless times. It's still one of my favorite Genesis songs. To be honest, I feel like this probably would have been a better album opener than Mama, because this feels like your typical Genesis pop song. But yet, even with that, it's still awesome. I just love how memorable the song structure is. Why did you always seem to be looking at you? You were looking at me. Oh, it's the same. It's just a shame that you're it's so catchy. Even though the lyrics are anything but, because it's like the end of a relationship, essentially. Musically, I love the song. The drumming's awesome. I love the piano and the organ solo that Tony Banks does is awesome. There's a really awesome guitar solo at the end by Mike Rutherford while there's that cool clap part. This is one. This is one I love singing along to. If I'm being honest, this is
every time.
This is an amazing song. Very much so in the top 5 for sure. That's a no-brainer. This song's amazing.
So, as someone who now loves pretty much everything Genesis put out and really likes their progressive stuff, like Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, Nursery Crime, Selling England by the Pound, this is still one of my favorite Genesis songs. I guess it's just because it's about as well crafted of a pop song as you can get. Plus, kind of just the amazing instrumentation put underneath by just three masters of their instruments. But it's just a good song. Like the piano part done by Tony Banks, really catchy. It's kind of he's kind of just playing along with the melody, but like it's super catchy. The melody will get stuck in your head, and the drumming. I heard that Phil Collins wrote this song to kind of sound like the Beatles, and that he said that the drumming was straight up Ringo Starr. So
That's a good comparison, actually. Like this could have been a good Beatles song, actually. I can see that comparison.
But I like how it's like you got the verse whenever he's singing really low, and then you get into it later on, and he goes up the octave and sings higher later on. And I love the bridge section. But I love you more than I wanted to. There's no point in trying to pretend. I like that part. And once again, the real hero of this song is Tony Banks and his keyboards. They just add such a layer to this. He has that like electric piano intro. He's got like some synthesizers that play chords over it. And then he's got this really cool organ solo in the middle that I think is amazing. I also like the outro solo by Mike Rutherford. Mike Rutherford, like Steve Hackett got plenty of time to play guitar solos, but Mike didn't get a lot of solos. Like I can think of this one, Burning Rope from, and then there were three. And then Behind the Lines. He's got a really cool guitar solo that he plays before the vocals come in on Behind the Lines. And a little bit on Duke's End as well. But Mike gets a chance to do a solo here. Really good. It's kind of simple, but very effective. Lyrically, it's about a relationship ending, but at the same time, like, he doesn't want it to end. He really loves her. It's just they're going through some stuff, and they need to figure it out. He's kind of fed up, but he wants it to keep going, but he's kind of fed up. So, really amazing song. And yes, it is still one of my favorite Genesis songs. I love it a lot. First one I ever heard, maybe that's why. Next. This one's going to be interesting. Home by the Sea, and I guess if a group second Home by the Sea in there as well. I don't know why they split that into two tracks. It's really just one track, the Home by the Sea, with an extended instrumental.
All right. Home by the Sea is a really cool song. This is definitely one of the more experimental songs on the album. There's some really cool instrumentation behind it. Some really cool synthesizers on the track. Some great drumming from Phil Collins. Lyrically, the song's very interesting. It's almost like a horror story. If I understand the lyrics correctly, because sometimes they like to be so coy with what they're singing about. Mama. Home by the Sea is this dude wandering around an abandoned house, and then it turns into like a spooky ghost story, and he gets sucked in the house and trapped in it.
Yep, that's it.
All right. But yeah, I think like it's got a really great chorus that I really like. I feel like this could have been I wish this one did better. Like I saw it was released as a single in other countries like Australia and New Zealand. I don't know why it didn't really catch on here, but I think this is a really cool song. And then the instrumental afterward, if we're combining the two, second Home by the Sea. I think if it was one track, I would say maybe it goes on a little too long. As an instrumental piece, it's pretty cool. I think I like it better as a standalone track, personally. There's some cool synthesizers on it, some cool jam session playing on it. I don't like it as much as past Genesis instrumentals. Like, I like Watt Gorilla and
Duke's End. Duke's Travels.
Duke's Travels. better, but it's not bad. It's probably I think on its own, it's probably one of the weaker songs on the album, but there's still some cool playing on it.
This song was a huge live staple for the band back in the day. They played this at like all their concerts. Super cool song. When I first listened to this album, this was kind of the big like standout. You know how you have like the best discovery? When I first listened to this album when I was a teenager, this was my favorite discovery on the album was this song here. Thought it was super cool. Love Tony Banks's keyboards on here. Love kind of just the creepy vibe of it. And then getting into the second, Home by the Sea, Phil is pulling out his Simmons electronic drum kit to get some different sounds, cool jamming. I like how it reprises the first Home by the Sea. Honestly, just a perfect first side of the record. Like, you can't really get much better than these few songs that we've had so far. And so, we are going to flip the record over and go to one of the most infamous songs in the Genesis catalog, Illegal Alien.
All right. Illegal Alien. I didn't know what I was getting into when I saw the title. I'm like, okay, what's this song going to be like? Well, this is probably the goofiest Genesis song I've ever heard.
Makes Harold the Barrel look like it was Supper's Ready or something like that.
Yeah. Or it makes Who Done It look like The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway.
Invisible Touch or something like that.
But yeah. So I actually did do some digging on this song. This song
Did you watch the music video?
The song was inspired by the members of Genesis who struggled to renew their passports on their U.S. tour. So they decided to do like this comical spin on immigration, particularly illegal immigration. And that's how we got the song. Yes, I did see the music video. The music video makes the song even funnier, in my opinion. I don't care what those PC haters say that it's racist.
You have to watch.
Here's about the political correctness. I just want to see some funny stuff.
The song and the video are not meant to be taken seriously at all. The whole thing's a joke. It's a goofy joke.
The whole song is a joke. I agree. And that's why I love the song. The song is meant to be a comical spin on it. Phil Collins embraces it. He even does this fake accent that I thought was so hilarious when I first listened to it. And again, much like That's All, the chorus is an earworm. It's no fun when you're an illegal alien. I've even had that song in my head when I'm doing other stuff. Like I was at school one day.
Oh no!
And I was humming the song. It was in my head though, so I didn't get weird looks.
Good. That's hilarious.
This is actually, to be honest, this is one of my favorite songs on the album. I just like the. I don't know. Whenever Genesis does a goofy song, it tends to be one of my favorites on the album. Robbery, Assault,
and Battery. I love that song.
Harold the Barrel, Counting Out Time.
All in the Mouse's Night.
Yeah, I love Who Done It.
Who Done It?
Yeah, this is another one I really like.
Get Him Out by Friday.
Yeah, Get Him Out by Friday is another one.
Oh boy. Well, the first time I ever listened to this album as a whole, I was sick. And I decided I'm going to listen to all of my records today. Back when I had like 5 records. And I turned the record over and I'm greeted with car horns and sound effects. And the song starts. And on the inside of the record, there's a picture from the music video. They are right there at the passport. And I'm looking, I'm reading along with the lyrics. I see that picture and I hear Phil Collins start singing in that accent, and I'm like, what is this? And I start laughing. I'm like, is he doing some kind of stupid accent? Is it like is that picture supposed to be from this song? Because if so, that's hilarious. And I didn't feel bad anymore. I mean, I was still sick, but I'm like, Phil Collins, you have made my day. And that's before I even saw the music. I saw the music video, and I'm like, I should not be laughing at this, but I am.
Yeah, because a lot of people, they'll be like, oh, you're horrible if you like this song.
Well, I don't think that the song is supposed to be making any big political statement. I think it's just supposed to be fun. And you can go on YouTube and you can watch them recording this song in the studio. They look like they're having a blast when they're making this song. My favorite part is, in the middle where you hear all the people rushing around and there's all the sound effects, and then you hear like a trumpet playing really out of tune. The trumpet is Phil Collins. And in the studio, Phil Collins can't really play the trumpet, but they're moving all the weird sound effects. They've already recorded that. I'll talk a little bit more how they recorded, but you see Phil Collins, he's got a trumpet, and he's just like, I'm gonna play the trumpet now. And then the sound effects start. It's like da 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 da. And then he looks at the camera and he goes, and it's the funniest thing. And then it shows them recording the sound effects, and Tony Banks grabs one of his huge synthesizers, and he's like, we're going to have to take this to record a sample. And they run over in the rain, and they're covering up his keyboard, and they go into a house, and there's a telephone, and he's like, call the telephone. And they call the telephone, and he's recording it on his keyboard, and he's like, ring, 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 ring. Okay, I think that'll make a good sample. So they take his keyboard, and they run out in the rain. They're going back into the studio, and they're like, okay, it's time to play the phone sound effect. Ring, ring, ring. I'm like, this is hilarious. These guys are making a song by sampling telephones and playing trumpets out of tune and doing goofy accents. Like, it's just fun. I know I shouldn't like the song this much, but it's fun and it's funny. So I don't know where it's going to rank on my list, but it's just a stupid song and it's hilarious. So now we're going to get to Taking It All Too Hard.
All right, so this is like, I guess, the ballad on the album. They tend to have a pretty good ballad on a lot of their albums, especially in the Phil Collins run. I like this one as well. I do really like the chorus. There's some great vocal work from Phil Collins. I like some of the synthesizers on the track. I thought like this was a pretty good hidden gem on the album. This one made my top 5.
All right. I'm surprised that more people don't know about this song. It's really good.
That's to me.
Really clever key changes in here. Really great ballad. Cool synth sounds from Tony Banks. Great melody. Like this song has the making of a great Genesis hit right here. But yet it's hidden here under That's All, Mama, and Illegal Alien, which were the singles from this album. But a really good song. I don't have a whole lot to say about it, but it's one that you just like, you got to listen to because it's really good. And I love the refrain, the hook, oh no, not the same mistakes again. You're taking it all too hard. That gets in my head sometimes. Okay, now we're gonna get to a song I'm really excited to talk about. Just a Job to Do.
All right. When I first listened to this song, this was in my top 5. But a certain re-listen of a song knocked it off. I think this is a really cool song. I think compared to some of the other songs on the album, I don't think it's as memorable compared to the other tracks. But on listening to it, I'm like, yeah, this is another cool song. Great production behind it. I don't have as much to say on this one, but it's still a really good one.
I really like this song. I've actually heard this song on the radio, oddly enough. It's not a big hit, but for some reason the local radio station plays it, and I'm like, yes, playing a Genesis deep cut that I think really should get more radio play.
I want to hear Illegal Alien on the radio, to be honest.
So this one is really cool. Very frantic sound to it. Mike doing like a delay thing on his guitar to kind of sound more frantic, and then really good drumming from Phil. I really like Tony's keyboard sounds, kind of reminiscent of Abacab. My favorite part is the part that goes. I think that's Tony Banks on the keyboard, but it's about a hitman who's out to get his target. Chorus is catchy, so catchy. I got a name, I got a number, I got a job to do. Boop, boop, doop, doop, doop. Yeah, it's really cool synthesizer sounds. This is an amazing song. I really like it. Track number 8, Silver Rainbow.
All right, so I listened to this album the first time, and I thought the song was pretty boring. And I listened to it a second time, and my thoughts are still the same on it. This is the one song on the album that I don't really care for that much. I will say I like there's a really cool keyboard section from Tony Banks at the beginning. When I heard it, I'm like, oh, okay, it's gonna really pick up once I heard the playing, and then the song kind of like meanders a little bit into randomness, and I just didn't really, I didn't really connect with this song, truthfully. This is the only song on the album that I'm like, I can skip this one.
It takes a lot of listens to really get into. Still probably one of, I don't know, I love all the songs on this album, but this one probably ranks more towards the bottom. I still really like it though. It takes a lot of listens to get into, but the main thing I like about this song is the keyboards. I really like all of the layering keyboards and Phil's drumming. Phil's drumming is really great on this song. This is probably the most out there song on the album. Just because the production kind of changes up just a few seconds into the song. Very kind of wacky production on this one. Really cool though. Still really like it. And that's going to get to our final song on the album. It's Gonna Get Better.
I do think this is a step up from Silver Rainbow. If Silver Rainbow was the album closer, I probably would have been disappointed. This is a better album closer, in my opinion. I do like the message behind the song. I do like the drumming on the song's really good. Not top 5 worthy, but still a really strong honorable mention and a really cool way to close off the album.
I really like this song. I think this is another one of those songs that should get more recognition. I love the opening synthesizer part. It's so weird but so cool. The tone that Tony Banks has there, and then the drums come in, and it's like, yeah, and then Mike's comes in on the bass and gets into that groove. This song has such a groove to it. I love that about it. And I love the chorus when it's like, it's gonna get better. The chord that they use there on "Better" is kind of a surprise chord. Like, it's not what I'm expecting to hear. Like, I think it's because the song is in a minor key, I think, and then they play a major chord, which kind of subverts your expectations. I love Phil's drum sound on this song, especially like they kind of changed the sound of his snare at the very end. Like some beats, it'll have a big reverb effect on it, and then some beats, it just sounds like a regular snare. Like it's all on the production from Hugh Padgham on this particular song. But I like how they kind of change up the sound of his snare at the end of the song. And I think it's a really great way to end this album. Nick says he'd give it a 9 or a 9.5, but it's one of his 5 least favorite Genesis albums. Okay. All right. Well, that is Genesis. Top 5.
Top 5. Well, I actually have 2 honorable mentions, which are Just a Job to Do and It's Gonna Get Better. Now the top 5. Number 5. Didn't think it'd make it in the top 5 on original listen, but number 5 is Mama. Number 4, Taking It All Too Hard. Number 3, Home by the Sea. Number 2. Call me crazy, but Illegal Alien, number 2.
It was one of the singles from this album. All right, the band thought it was good enough to put out as a single.
Number 1 is That's All.
Okay, well, I know what my top 3 is, but I need to pick another 2. Okay, number 5, It's Gonna Get Better. Number 4, Just a Job to Do. Number 3, Home by the Sea. Number 2, Mama. And number 1, That's All.
All right.
So, what's this one gonna get out of 10?
Well, when I first listened to this album, I still liked it enough. I didn't think it was on par with Abacab or Duke, but I still liked it enough just for. To be honest, I thought That's All was a good song, and I liked hearing some of the discoveries, like some of the other singles. I'm like, yeah, I'm still going to give it an 8 out of 10. But then I listened to the album again. I'm like, you know what? I think I might have slept on some of these songs. I think the only reason it was down was because I really didn't care for Mama when I first listened to it. I liked Mama the second time. Made my top 5, so I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to bump the score up to a 9. I think it's a really good album. It's on the lower end of my album ranking, but I've given a bunch of 9s on Genesis. So
You've given them all like 8s or 9s, pretty much.
Yeah, for the most part, it's like 8s or 9s. Like it's probably lower on the album ranking, but like to me, a 9 is still a really good score. So take that for what you will.
I'm going to give this a 9 as well. I thought about 9.5, but I'm just going to go with 9. I do like Abacab a bit better, even though, honestly, Abacab has more songs that I don't like as much as this album. I just feel like the highs are a bit higher on Abacab, other than, like, That's All. Like, pretty much the first side of this. The first side of this album, I think, is perfect. Second side dips off a little bit, but still really good. I still love pretty much all the songs on this album. But yeah, it's I don't like it as much as Abacab or Duke. I'd probably say this is their weakest album of the 80s because you got Duke, Abacab, and Invisible Touch as the other options. But if they didn't have as good albums as those, this could be considered their best album. They have just so many great albums.
Yeah, but this album's still really good that it's in your top 100 albums, so that says something.
Yep. Yeah. And if this is, then you're going to be seeing a lot more of their records if this is in my top 100 albums. Okay, well, next time we will be back for, oh my goodness, it's time for Invisible Touch.
Ooh.
Oh, I can't believe that's the next album. Wow.
Oh, I think
we're
going to be in too deep on this one.
Yep, I'm going down like a monkey. If you get the reference from Tonight.
Well, I'm sitting here in a land of confusion because I didn't get that.
Yeah, I was just throwing it all away.
I know it's not going to be tonight, but I'll be singing it when we get to it.
Mm-hmm. With a Brazilian and a domino. I'm just coming up with random references now from the album. But anyway, next episode is Invisible Touch. Super excited to talk about that one because that is one of my favorite Genesis albums. So we will see you next time. Until then, remember that music is art and art is expression, even if it comes in the form of a simple pop song like That's All. We will see you guys later.